Hey, what's up, everybody? Good morning. It's Tuesday. I am actually up in Vancouver, Canada, British Columbia. So I'm actually on a ferry right now. It's actually kind of cool. I don't know if you guys can hear me well. Hopefully you guys can see that. It's pretty smoky from the fires in California, but I'm up here in Vancouver. I'm gonna be teaching, so big thanks to Jack Miller and Rob for bringing me up, bringing ice up. We're gonna be doing a lumbar spine course. So it's wonderful to be in Canada. I mean, Vancouver Island is absolutely gorgeous. So I'm gonna be spending a couple days up here and teaching over the weekend. And looking forward to the whole experience. So, one thing that's been coming up a lot during classes, and this is kind of like a pain science Tuesday. We usually do orthopedics and pain science on Tuesday. So I want to jump on and talk about, a challenging issue that we face and discuss in courses all the time. And that is this idea of crossing the bridge, right? In that, where we find a lot of challenges is when people are trying to have a pain science conversation with a patient, getting over to that nature of dialogue, right? Because your patient oftentimes doesn't come in expecting to be talking about the nature of pain and how they perceived it differently than maybe what it actually is. And they're expecting to come in and get traditional physical therapy in a lot of cases. So the challenge, I don't think, is necessarily delivering the pain science material. It's crossing that bridge and adjusting their expectation to what you're going to be doing to help them, right? And all of you, if you're making an honest effort at this in the clinic, all of us have had that challenge where we go to shift the nature of the dialogue and the patient starts to say, hey man, are you saying this is in my head? Like, are you saying I'm making this up? And you're like, no, I'm not saying that at all. But in your head, you're like, I am kind of saying it's in your head, but not in the way that you think I'm saying it. Like I know the point is, it gets real slippery real fast. And if you try to cross that bridge too quickly, we often lose our footing, right? And so the question is, when you're realizing somebody might be dealing with central sensitization, when you realize somebody's might have more of a central nervous system driver, how do you begin to get over into that type of dialogue without having an awkward bridge crossing? How do you take somebody who's not at all ready to receive that material, right, and help them realize you're going to go in that direction? Not only go, but how are you going to help them walk with you? So we've messed around with this a lot over the years and tried different methods. And guys, what I find extremely valuable is utilizing the pain catastrophizing scale as your bridge crosser. So to kind of give you how it goes with me in the clinic is on day one, while we always use psychologically informed language, I usually don't dive into really formal therapeutic neuroscience education. So on day one, I oftentimes recognize that, there's some maladaptive beliefs, there's some rumination, there's some catastrophizing. This is gonna be a plan of care where during this plan, I wanna be shifting gears kind of towards that cognitive behavioral therapy, looking at using TNE and graded exposure. Like, I'm realizing I wanna go that direction. So what I do on day one to set the stage is I give them the pain catastrophizing scale. And I say, hey, go home and fill this out, right, and bring it back in, and I'm gonna wanna have a conversation about it. The reason I use it is multiple fold, right? So many of you know Beth Darnell. If you have not heard, sorry guys, I'm holding the phone so close to me. It's really windy up here on the deck on the ferry, so sorry if we're getting a real close up here, but if you have not listened to Beth Darnell's Pain Reframed episodes, she's been on twice, go back and check that out. She is doing some incredible work out of Stanford, looking at the relationship between pain catastrophizing and ultimate outcome, right? Looking at it, with surgical cases, right? So somebody who has pain catastrophizing tendencies and looking at long-term outcome, it's a huge variable. And I've talked to Adrian Lowe about the role of pain catastrophizing, and he feels it's very strong. And so some of the big leaders out there are really encouraging, looking at that element in particular. And I find that it has tremendous utility as a conversation changer. So here's how it plays out. So the patient comes back in on visit 2, right? And they roll in and they have that filled out. So now I know I'm gonna wanna begin engaging that conversation. So when they lay it down and they have marked things like, I feel I can't go on. So for those of you not familiar with the PCS, go have a look at it. But some of the questions are things like, I feel I can't go on. I worry about it all the time. So now what you can do is, as opposed to trying to pull that information from your patient, now you can simply look down at the sheet and say, Barbara, why do you feel why do you feel you can't go on? Like, why do you feel that you're not going to be able to get over this? And now pretty soon Barbara opens right up and says, well, look, Jeff, I don't have the resources to go on, right? Like my boss is harping at me. I can't get time off work. I've really got no help at home. And now she's laying at your feet these critical conversations that all you have to do is unpack, right? So now you can sit back and say, well, Barbara, it sounds like you have a lot coming down on you, right? And that kind of makes sense, because as we talked about yesterday, you've got pain in a whole lot of areas, and sometimes that can indicate that your nervous system's a bit ramped up. And honestly, Barbara, I can see why, right? It sounds like you have a lot going on. Why don't we step back and begin to strategize, right? How can we take on each of these issues, right? So you're saying that you feel it's never going to get better. Well, let me tell you, I want to share some good news about the overall prognosis of the kind of pain you're dealing with, right? And I want to talk about all the resources we have available. And I want to talk about how we can do pacing, right, and help you feel that you have a little more control than right now you feel you do. So what you're doing, you guys, is you're taking somebody who wasn't ready for this kind of conversation. You're using their own information in their own words to selectively engage on topics that are going to have a lot more value than probably us doing, manual therapy or specific exercises on someone who's had pain and a lot of maladaptive characteristics going on for a long time. We know think really lies in using some of these self-report surveys sorry, I had a little breakup in connection. I'm getting way out here in the Gulf, I think. In taking that information from the patient and bringing that into the dialogue, right, under the umbrella of the way you're overall seeing their presentation and plan of care. But it's always easier to take somebody else's words, right, and help them reflect on that and use that as a conversation starter, use that as a way to dive deeper, versus you basically delivering a lecture, right? You being the one with the information, the clinician being the student, and you basically educating them. Much better to get an idea of where they're coming from and then use that as a shared decision-making tool to decide how you could both go forward. I just find that puts you in a way better, more cooperative, more engaged position to take on some of these challenging conversations and really make some significant progress. So as opposed to trying to be in a lead seat all the time and say, okay, here we go, central sensitization seems to be on board, I am now going to begin my lecture on pain science. Why not lay out the survey, get some information from the patient on where they're coming from, and then take that information and say, hey, what do we think is going on here? How can I use my knowledge and resources? How can we use your motivation where you think barriers are lowest? And how can we together chart a path forward based upon the information you have presented here and my understanding of how these things play out? So really think about that. Think about utilizing the pain catastrophizing scale as a tool to engage on key conversations about maladaptive beliefs that you know are really going to kind of hold that pin and hold that key to you bringing that patient forward and getting them out of a persistent pain mindset and persistent pain suffering. I find it works great in the clinic, and I know it's a challenging thing to do, so give it a shot. Let me know how it goes for you all. I will post, whenever I get decent internet, I will post the pain catastrophizing scale underneath this video. And for those of you who don't use it, I really think it's valuable. For those of you who are losing that patient when you try to cross the bridge, I think it's invaluable. So have a look at it. Let me know what you think. Hope everyone's having a great Tuesday. I'll be up here in Vancouver for the next handful of days, but I'll probably see you guys live from Knoxville, Tennessee next week. All right, cheers, everybody.